In September of 2015, I had an uncle who passed away due to cancer. I was only in 6th grade at the time. My uncle's funeral was held at a nice looking building, which was also connected to a cemetery. His funeral service was held for 3 days and I attended all of them. Since the funeral home looked nice, the cemetery next door looked just as nice. There was a small pond with fishes, cherry blossom trees, flowers, and lots of green grass. The cemetery looked like it was taken care of very well, which made sense since this was located near the upper class neighborhood. Because of this, you can imagine how many kids would have loved to run around and play in a cemetery. And yes, I was one of those kids. A lot of Hmong funerals were held at this location, and some parents do let their kids go out to play in the cemetery since it's very beautiful. But they always warn us to not trip or fall. Now back to my uncle's funeral, I was taking a walk in a cemetery with a couple of my cousins and was enjoying the nice weather. As we kept on walking, I asked my cousin, "Isn't it sad that people come here to see their deceased loved ones and don't bring anything?" To which my cousin replied, "Yeah, I know, but not everyone does what Hmong people do and bring food or drinks." I turned to my cousin. "I feel bad for them. Don't you think the spirits are probably hungry too?" "I don't know," my cousin answered. As we walked back to the funeral home, I thought to myself that I was going to do a good deed and give food to the deceased. I went to an area where guests sat to eat and took some snacks from the table, and then walked out to the cemetery with a bunch of fruits and small candy in my hands. I went to a few tombstones and placed food on the ground. Some of my older cousins followed me and watched me from afar. They just laughed and asked what I was doing, and I responded, "I'm helping to feed the spirits." My older cousins continued laughing and walked away. I didn't care much and just kept doing what I was doing, thinking in my head that I was doing the right thing. The next day comes by and the funeral service is still ongoing for my uncle. I went back to the cemetery and saw that all the food I gave disappeared except for the plastic wrappings. I was slightly happy, thinking that the spirits ate the food. My older cousins from the day before chuckled and said that small animals probably came and ate it instead. Everyone was joking about the situation until one of my older cousins came up to me. "Be careful. If you keep feeding and being nice to them, they might follow you home." Then my cousin walked away. I shrugged it off and just kept thinking to myself that I was doing a positive thing. Another day passed and my uncle's funeral came to an end. We finally buried him and bid our farewell. Soon night came and I'm already in bed getting ready to go to sleep for school. My parents were in the living room. As I was drifting off to sleep, I kept hearing a dog barking outside my backyard. I knew my neighbor had a dog, but he usually never barks at night. I paid no attention to it and just kept trying to sleep. Moments later, I heard laughter coming outside from my window. It was distorted. I couldn't comprehend if it was a woman or male voice. The laughter was quiet, but slowly got louder and closer to me every minute. I also heard a jingling noise, or as if someone was wearing Hmong clothes with lots of beads and coins. I didn't want to expect the worst, so I just kept closing my eyes trying to sleep. Soon, I felt a strong pressure on my body. I couldn't move at all. My heart was beating fast. Now I was starting to get scared. I couldn't open my eyes, but I just knew I was not alone. There was a strong force keeping me in place, and I couldn't get out from its grip. Soon, I heard a distorted whisper.
"You are foolish. Now I'm going to possess you."
I can almost hear, almost as if whoever said it smiled and chuckled in an odd tone. My heart dropped. I'd used up all the strength I could and screamed as loud as I can. A few seconds later, my parents burst into my bedroom. I could finally move my body now, and I went to embrace my mom as she ran towards me. I cried so hard that I couldn't even talk. My parents asked me what happened, but all I could do was cry. I remember my mom giving my dad a look, and he knew exactly what to do. He quickly walked outside, grabbed a rock horn, and started throwing it around the house while chanting some words that I couldn't understand. He made sure to speak in a very loud, angry tone. I ended up calming down afterwards and told my parents what I did at the cemetery. They lectured me, but knew that I didn't know any better, so they just left it at that. Now I'm 19, turning 20 very soon, and I can still remember vividly of that night that I got sat on. This incident happened when I was around 7 or 8. My family and I moved into a small 2-roomed duplex in St. Paul. In one of the rooms, there was an attic where 3 of my other siblings and I took. We didn't care about the attic. All we cared about was how big the room was, and it made us happy. We lived in that house for about a good 3 or 4 years. The house also got broken into with gang-related things in the area. One night, I stayed up past 1 a.m. playing with my toys until suddenly I heard a noise coming from downstairs. I went down to check it out, searched where and what could have made that noise until I walked into the kitchen and boom, my body froze. What I saw was a dark, shadowy figure that looked like a small child standing in the moonlight coming through a kitchen window. I didn't know whether to scream or to run to my room. I just stood there for a good minute staring at what I had just seen. I summoned the courage to run to my room and tucked myself into bed with the blanket over my head. It was the most frightening thing that had ever happened to me until it happened again. It was late at night again and I couldn't sleep, so then I went downstairs to grab a drink of water and a little snack. I was on my way upstairs after having a little snack until I saw the figure standing at the top of the stairs. I froze again, not knowing what to do. I felt my body to move and ran up the stairs past the figure and went into bed. A few minutes and hours passed and randomly I woke up to a sound in my room. I peeked over my blanket to see what the noise was and I saw the attic wide open. What I had seen was the same figure but bigger and taller, like an adult. It was standing on the attic stairs staring at me. When I saw it, I screamed at the top of my lungs. My parents came running in and my siblings woke up to my scream. My parents couldn't believe their eyes when they came into the room. The dark ceiling attic opened. Some time passed and my uncle and younger brother claimed to have seen the same thing. My parents had enough of it, so they set up one of those Hmong rituals to bless us and protect us from evil that was in the house. Years went past and I remember what happened to me in that duplex. Curiosity got the best of me. I researched the background of the house. It turned out that a mother and her son were beaten and abused in the attic to death by the father. 2 years ago, I went to this unfamiliar park with my older sister and our nephew, who was only 2 years old at the time. A boy around 8 years old came to play with him. They were in the sandbox and the little boy looked at me and smiled. I told my nephew to play nice with the kid, but my nephew ignored me because he couldn't talk full sentences yet, but he knew how to say yeah and no. I was living with my older sister, but finally managed to save and moved out by myself. I found a nice apartment, about 110 acres. I was lying in bed one night. I was getting tired and then someone grabbed my hand by the side of the bed and pulled me down. I was wide awake but couldn't see what or who was grabbing me. I shook it off. Finally, I stood up from my bed and looked near my door and there he was. The same little boy who was playing with my nephew was standing in the dark, his silhouette looking at me. I got scared, so I pulled the cover over my head. It's been 2 years and why is this boy in my house? I thought to myself. I took my cover off and he was still standing there. This time, he had a frown on his face. I told him to leave me alone and turned to my side, trying to get some sleep, praying it was a dream. I looked over my covers and he was gone. Then I feel something on top of me, and he came and sat on me, and I struggled to get out or push him off. I asked him why he was doing this to me, and he mumbled, but nothing but air came out of his mouth. Then I quickly got up and turned on the lights and he disappeared. I stayed like that all night, not sleeping. The next morning, I ran to my mom's house and she tied a protection string around my hand. I called my sister, since she's a stay-at-home mom, and asked if I could visit her. We were talking when I heard a little boy in the background, so I asked her who it was. She replied that it was no one. She's all alone and her kids are all at school. Her husband is at work, so she was just cleaning the living room and cooking. I told her my story and she said that I'm scaring her, and then she hung up on me. I went to her house later and told her everything. When we went back to my place that day, I no longer felt the boy was there anymore. Back then, I didn't know the boy was a ghost. My sister never saw the boy playing with her nephew, and my mom, a shaman, only told me afterwards. There was an old man, and he killed the boy in the park. He strangled him, and then he killed himself. The little boy followed you home because he wanted a mom. But to me, I always wondered what happened to the old man. Silo Apartments. This has got to be one of the most creepiest apartments in Sacramento. A lot of Hmong people lived here. I've never lived here, but my cousins did. And this story happened to my friends my cousins hung out with at the apartments. There have been a lot of your original cliche ghost stories, but this one really happened. Silo Apartments had a big Hmong community in the early 90s to the 2000s. I don't know if there are still any Hmong people there anymore. It is ghetto and it is settled in Oak Park. Most of all the kids got along. My cousin and I were really naughty at the time. We were age 10 at the time. We would play cops and robbers and tag until the sun went down. I didn't live there, but I got close to all the friends my cousin had at the apartments. One day, my cousin and his friends went to go play during the day. They had this idea to go into one of the apartment homes that had no renters at the moment. The apartments were never maintained and security didn't even lock the empty apartments up. I don't actually remember what they were doing in there, but I think they were playing tag in the dark in an empty apartment. Nothing unusual happened the night they played, but the next day, one of the boys got really sick, and it was pretty freaky. The friend's older brother told us that night that he kept pointing fingers at the wall, telling his mom, right there, they're gonna get me." This went on for a couple of days, and then the family had a shaman come over to check on the boy. The shaman told the family that the boy had bothered a dead spirit in the empty home that my cousin and his friends went into. It was a Mexican lady. She died in the apartment just before the people who had lived there moved out. One story got to another until someone pointed out that the prior family were some African American family, and the shaman came to the conclusion that maybe this happened to the boy because the prior family did not bless the house before moving in, and when they left, the spirit was still there. It was still unclear why the dead spirit only chose this boy specifically when there were other boys in the home too. This part is going to be hard for me to explain, but bear with me. In order to get the dead spirit away from the sick friend, the shaman created this little cage and put money inside. It was to trap the dead spirit in. I think many of you know what I'm talking about. It's like a small platform and has food or money with some incense sticks. The shaman took it to throw away somewhere in a pond in West Sacramento, which takes me to the next story. Shamans create these cages to trap, host, and throw it somewhere far away so the evil ghost inside won't be able to come back and mess with whoever it is haunting. I have this uncle. He loves fishing a lot. In the early 2000s, my uncle went fishing a lot in West Sacramento. He was around 18 at the time. Along with him, he also had a buddy his age that tags along with him all the time to go fishing. One day, my uncle went fishing with his friend. His friend was fishing on one side of the pond and my uncle went around to the other side. As he was getting to the other side, he came across something weird. It was one of those platform cages that I was talking about. It had a $1 bill, some chicken meat, and some burnt out incense. My uncle knew immediately what it was and freaked out, and so he went back to his friend fishing on the other side. He didn't tell his friend because he didn't want the both of them to be scared. Besides, it was during the day and the sun was out, so he decided not to think too much. It was getting close to sunset and my uncle wanted to leave, but his friend still wanted to fish. suggesting this time that the fish were going to bite. My uncle didn't mind much and didn't think too much about what was over on the other side, so he stayed till his friend was done fishing. Finally, the sun had set. It wasn't completely dark, but it was getting to that dark bluish kind of view. My uncle got curious and looked over to the spot across the pond where he saw the cage. There, and I quote, he said that he saw a little girl lying on her stomach eating the chicken. He freaked out and told his friend to go. This spooked his friend and they both ran into the car. On their way back, my uncle told the friend what he saw. They never went back to that place, but even after that night, nothing happened to him. They never got sick or anything, just that my uncle got really scared. The year was 1998, and I was the youngest of 6 kids. I was 5 years old at the time, and my oldest sibling was 12. During that time, many people did not have much for home entertainment. Cell phones were not a common household item. Saturday morning cartoons were the best thing ever, and the news was always on from 5 to 7. One Saturday night, my parents left to see our relatives. It was just the 6 of us home alone. We decided to play our favorite game, hide and seek. My oldest sister was the first seeker. She turned around and faced the wall. She then turned off the lights. The house went dark for the moment as our eyes adjusted. I saw the other siblings walk quickly to find a hiding spot. I decided to hide in my sister's room. It was a small room that was about 10 by 12. There was a bed in the middle of the room, with the head of the bed touching the opposite wall of the entrance door. The entrance door was located next to a corner. The closet door was also next to the same corner, but on the adjacent wall. If one door was fully open, then it would touch the other door. There was also a window on the opposite side of the closet door that would shine some light into the room. I walked into the room and slowly shut the door behind me. I looked around and saw that there weren't any good hiding spots. My sister yelled, "Ready or not, here I come." I rushed under the bed and laid there quietly. I heard one of the doors creaking open. I thought that my sister was coming in to check the room. I laid there with anticipation to see if she would be able to find me under the bed. Then, I noticed that it wasn't the entrance door that opened. It was the closet door. My eyes widened as I immediately knew that it was not my siblings. Time began to slow down as the door continued to open. It opened all the way and then stopped without hitting the other door. I looked intently at the closet opening, and to my horror, it was a figure. My sister's dress began to walk out of the closet. The dress covered everything except for the toes of the shoe. The figure slowly walked out the closet and made its way across the feet of the bed, past the window, and down the side of the bed. It stopped halfway down the bed. Both feet came together, then it turned 90 degrees to a right. Now, it was facing the bed. Both of the toes of the shoes were pointed towards the bed, only a foot away from me. The figure then turned again to the right and began walking back into the closet. The door swung shut after the figure was out of my sight. My sister walked in seconds afterwards. She looked under the bed and said, "I found you." I was thrilled to have been found. I continued to play for the rest of the night. I kept the secret to myself for a few years until I was in middle school. My siblings were telling me stories one night, and I decided to tell them about the time in my sister's room. I told them the story, and one of my siblings told me that our oldest sister had played the Ouija board a few days earlier, but my sister and her friends upstairs were not sure if they had burned everything when they finished the game. I thought back to my time since that incident, and I do remember having a few Hmong families move in and out of the upstairs duplex. I had befriended a few of the kids. They kept telling me that things were going missing or being misplaced in their house. I was even falsely blamed for one of those missing incidents. I still wonder if the strange activities were due to coincidence or if there was really something strange happening in that duplex. There were unanswered questions that still haunt me to this day. Did the figure walk out to see if my sister was sleeping? It walked back into the closet because it did not see a person laying down on the bed. Did it continue to come back to see my sister each night till she moved out? In early 2017, I was offered a job in Monroe, North Carolina. My office is located in an archive house, very sophisticated and rich-like. It was built in 1902 with about 4,000 square feet. The house was 2 stories high and it has an attic. To the right side of the office laid a huge church. You had to cross the street to get there. The front of the office was the funeral home. Finally, to the left side was a lawn with multiple docks and a 1-story brick building. Beyond this building was a family-owned business. They carved gravestones. Work hours were standard, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., but sometimes I stayed 1 or 2 hours later. After a few months, daylight savings took place and it got darker by 5 o'clock. I started on the second floor with other coworkers. One evening around 6 p.m., I was trying to finish one of my projects. Everyone had already left, except the HR. She's in the other room across the hall. I saw her and went back to work. She usually checks up on us before she leaves because the last person has to set the security alarm. She will always remind us too. I was very deep into my work and occasionally would watch some YouTube videos to wake me up. Before I knew it, the time was 7 p.m. I got up and checked on the HR. Her office was dark. I wasn't scared, but feeling alone in a big empty building felt unpleasant, so I decided to call it a day. I went back into my office room and turned off my light. The second floor was completely dark since there's only one light switch for the whole floor at the end of the hall by the stairs. I turned on my phone flashlight and walked out of my room toward the stairs. Suddenly, I heard a humming sound and it sounded like a kid. I stopped moving where I was at, wondering if I could have been mistaken. I heard the heavy squeal of those semi-trucks braking outside. Unsure and in denial, I stood still and listened closely. This time, I heard it clearly, a humming of a little boy coming from downstairs. My heart sank. I was frozen. I felt goosebumps. I refused to go down the stairs, but it was my only way out. I heard it again, humming from downstairs. The thought of a pale little boy, like in The Grudge, running past me from the stairs and straight at me flashed through my mind. I slowly walked sideways back to my office, with my eyes focused at the stairs. I turned on the light and closed the door. I thought to myself, what are you going to do? Jump out the window? That's crazy. On the second floor? Call your boss? How ridiculous would that sound? Once I mustered up enough courage, I walked fast out of my room to the end of the hallway and turned on the second floor light. I came back to my office room and turned the light off. Cautiously, and still full of goosebumps, I walked down the stairs into the dark first floor. The humming noise came back again from the kitchen. I ran downstairs and out the door to the front. When I looked back at the house, I saw nothing through the window. Knowing I had to go back inside and close the door to set the security alarm in the kitchen area really made me feel sick to my stomach. I went back and did it. It was the longest 10 seconds in my life. The next day, I asked all my coworkers if they've ever experienced anything. Of course, they knew the place was haunted. Even the boss and HR knew. One coworker said that around 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., he usually hears something or someone going up and down the stairs and sighing heavily. They did that often and will do that a couple times throughout the night. There's another coworker who lived just 3 hours away and usually sleeps in the office room from time to time. He said that some nights, the security alarm will go off, sending the sheriff to check the place. The sheriff told him stories about the house. The first family that lived in the house had a son that passed away. They didn't know if it was an illness or an accident. The second owners bought the place in the 1950s, but kept on hearing noise in the attic as if someone was up there during the night. They would get the sheriffs to come and check the attic, only to find nothing. They even hired a few guards, only to catch nothing, and eventually the guards were too expensive to keep. One day, the lady of the house ran out in horror and screamed that something was in the attic, and never returned. No one knew what she saw in the attic that day, and the story's gone cold. The house was empty for a few years, and a hair salon took over. They were on the first floor. Eventually, they too left the house empty again, until my boss came across the place and decided to turn it into an office area. Those who have experienced the spirits in that house can only conclude that there are two spirits, a boy and a man in a suit. In the summer of 2002, all of us kids were running out of things to keep us entertained. I don't remember how we learned to play the Ouija board, but that kept us awfully entertained. It was there to be convenient for conversating with the other side. The worst part of it all was that we learned how to make our own board by using a piece of regular lined paper and a quarter. Anyone who wanted to participate would lay their index finger on a piece of the quarter. Once all the participants were ready, we would move the quarter in a circular motion and chant, Ouija board, are you there? And just let the quarter rest until it starts moving on its own. The process was usually fast, and the quarter would start dragging all of our index fingers to the yes indication, which was labeled as the sun. My cousins and I would play it often. I guess we liked the thrill of being scared by it more than the old regular ghost stories. Most of the times after playing the Ouija board, we would usually dispose of it by ripping it and burning it away from where we played it. When we would occupy ourselves with this Ouija board, we'd often get people we didn't know. We would ask what their name was, and they would hover the quarter over each corresponding letter until we figured out their name. You basically can ask any questions you wanted to, and the entity from the other side would answer accordingly. Once we were done talking to the entities, we would ask them if we could leave. If they said no, then we'd keep asking until they say yes, or else they'll haunt you. So, to the real story of why we all stopped playing and viewing this Ouija board as a game. Late one evening, my older sister and her friends gathered at my uncle's house and played the Ouija board. Everyone got carried away with asking questions, and my sister slipped out saying, Out of all of us, who is able to see you? The quarter started hovering over a few letters, and everyone was shocked. The entity had spelled out my sister's name and my younger cousin's name. She knew there was regret to that question because soon after, everyone started feeling uncomfortable and wanted out. The board wouldn't let them leave, so my sister got angry and just left without asking its permission. When she got home that night, she had a headache, one that she never felt before. It was late, a little past midnight, and she was the only one up. It was hard for her to find sleep. She tossed and turned and suddenly felt uneasy. From across the room was the little green woven stool that my grandpa had made. It started making that creaky noise as if someone was settling to sit in it. Then it stopped. My sister was frozen still, shivering and sweating under the blanket. There was a low, husky whisper that drilled her very core.
Can you hear me?
The husky male voice kept on asking over and over in English, then suddenly changed over to Hmong. It laughed an eerie chuckle and mocked.
Can you see me now?
It kept speaking to her in many tongues, and she tried waking me up. She said that everyone was asleep, out cold. This was very odd because we slept with my grandparents and they didn't even hear her too. Finally, she found sleep and dozed off silently. The following morning, she woke up for school, thinking that maybe her headache caused her to have a nightmare. My parents left early for work and everyone was still fast asleep. She got out of her bed and did her daily routine. In the bathroom, she went. She kept the bathroom door open because she felt unsafe in an enclosed space alone. She turned on the water and started to wash her face. When she opened her eyes again, she realized that the light had turned off. Her heart raced, and before she could react, The bathroom door slammed shut and she found herself fighting to get up from the floor. From what my sister can recall, she screamed at the top of her lungs. She wrestled with this thing that she couldn't physically feel. Suddenly, the door swings open and she runs out of the house to my cousin's place, which at the time they only lived across the street. My cousins were also getting ready for school. She knocked frantically at their door and they opened to see her in tears. All she really said was that she was visited by a ghost. She stated that her back kind of feels weird. Oh my God. One of my cousin's eyes shot wide open. Your back is bleeding. She went to tell her parents and they came to my sister's aid. They slowly lifted up my sister's shirt over her back and saw the most eerie thing. 3 long needle-like scratches starting from her neck to her lower back. My uncle then said, "This is not a ghost. It's a demon." My uncle informed my parents about what had happened. Some nights after that, my sister would still get visits from the demonic entity. It always mocked and laughed at her. It wouldn't leave her alone. My parents decided to ask these church people to come over and bless her with holy water, but it didn't seem to work because she was still seeing this demon. Finally, they resorted to the one thing they knew best, shamanism. They called one of my uncles who was very good at fending off evil and catching spirits. He came over and took a close look at my sister, saying, This is not a regular ghost." He gathered red ropes and white lining and twined them together, chanting a whole new language. He spat on it, jumped around, and wiped a Hmong knife right along the twined red and white rope. When he was finished, he reminded my sister over and over again, "Never take this off, no matter what. Keep it on, and the demon will stay away." After that day, my sister never saw him again. She still feels as if he's still fighting to haunt her life again, but there's a barrier he can't cross. My sister's always had a sixth sense when it comes to spirits. That's probably how it found her to be an easy prey. I remember reading about evil demons being able to escape from the Ouija board. Most evil entities will use the Ouija board as an entrance portal to the human world. That's probably how he escaped and entered our world. It's only fun and games until someone gets hurt.